Hello everyone, welcome back to Whodunit, the channel where we dive into the darkest corners of true crime. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, because today we're going deep into a story that's both chilling and heartbreaking. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Jeanine Cammarata, 37 years old, a mother and an elementary school teacher in Staten Island. To her students, she was a small but radiant light, always smiling, always there when they needed her. To her family, she was the anchor, the steady force that held everything together for her 3 children. Everyone who knew Jeanine saw in her both resilience and a heart full of kindness. On the night of March 30th, 2019, Jeanine wrapped up a busy day with something simple and ordinary: a shopping trip with her new boyfriend, Aaron Suchi. They stopped at Target, picked up a few everyday items. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic. When the clock inched past 9 o'clock that evening, Jeanine drove away in her white Chevrolet Cruze, telling Aaron she was heading to Queens to see her 2 youngest children. The headlights of her car cut through the darkness. That was the last time anyone ever saw Jeanine alive. Only hours later, her phone went silent. No texts, no calls, no answers. A woman who lived with discipline, who never disappeared without a word, had suddenly vanished into the night, as if swallowed by something unseen. What lay behind her disappearance? A simple family visit, or a trap carefully laid out long before? This story begins with a woman defined by love and devotion, yet ends with a truth so cold it chills the soul. And to uncover what really happened, we must descend into the shadows, into the place where those who once spoke words of love revealed themselves as something far more monstrous. Jeanine Cammarata was never just an ordinary mother. She was a fighter in the everyday sense, a petite woman, standing under 5 feet tall, yet carrying a will and strength that seemed larger than life. By day she taught at public school 29 in Staten Island, where her fierce graders saw her as a fairy teacher, a gentle presence who turned lessons into games, who made the classroom glow with warmth. By night, she picked up shifts at the Dollar Tree in Grant City to make ends meet. Despite the exhaustion, Jeanine never lost her smile, because her true joy lived in her 3 children. Their laughter, their innocence, their future gave her strength to keep going. But behind that picture of resilience were cracks nobody wanted to see. Jeanine once believed she had found happiness when she met Michael Cammarata. In the beginning, Michael played the part of a caring man, showering her with affection, telling her everything she longed to hear. She believed she had finally found her safe harbor. They married in April, convinced they were starting a new life together. But the honeymoon glow faded quickly. Beneath the charm, Michael's true nature revealed itself: controlling, suffocating, jealous, to the point of obsession. Friends recalled how Michael began creeping into every corner of Jeanine's life. He changed her Facebook passwords, tried to hack into her email, even followed her home late at night with his car headlights turned off so she wouldn't notice. Jeanine's close friend Jessica once asked bluntly, "Are you okay? Is he hurting you?" Jeanine brushed it aside with a strained smile. "No, he's never hit me." But those words were less reassurance and more denial, because the fear lived in her eyes. By 2017, Jeanine had had enough. She packed up, left their shared home, and moved into a small apartment in New Brighton. She filed for and received a protective order after several frightening encounters with Michael. Each step she took toward independence felt like walking into battle, a single woman standing up against a man who refused to let go, and against a legal system that made custody fights long and brutal. The tension peaked in March of 2019. Jeanine officially filed divorce papers, demanding full custody of her two youngest children. For Michael, this was not just the end of a marriage, it was the collapse of his control. Losing custody meant losing not only his children, but also his power over Jeanine and the money that would follow in child support and alimony. In Michael's twisted mind, love was never about love. It was about dominance. And losing dominance meant losing everything. Meanwhile, Jeanine had found a small glimmer of hope in a new relationship. Aaron Sushi Sokohoth, a co-worker, entered her life like a flicker of light in the darkness. He showed her kindness, offered her a chance at something new. But his presence only fueled Michael's rage. To Michael, Jeanine wasn't just leaving. She was defying him, daring to build a future with someone else. All the elements were in place. A bitter custody battle. Divorce papers filed, the looming threat of child support, and the appearance of a new boyfriend. It was a perfect storm building toward an inevitable explosion. Jeanine believed she was stepping closer to freedom, closer to the life she and her children deserved. But she could not see the shadow growing behind her, a shadow preparing to turn her hope into a nightmare. In those final days of March 2019, Jeanine still taught her students, still prepared for her court dates, still spoke to friends about her dream of reuniting her children under one roof. No one could have imagined that only hours after leaving Target on March 30th, all of those dreams would be extinguished by the very man who once promised to love her forever. On the morning of Monday, April 1st, 2019, the classroom at Public School 29 in Staten Island felt unsettlingly different. The front of the room where Jeanine Cammarata usually stood with her marker in hand was silent. Jeanine was never late, never absent without a reason. Principal Linda Manfredi sensed it immediately. This wasn't a simple sick day. Something was deeply wrong. At the same time, Aaron Suki, Jeanine's new boyfriend, was growing anxious. He hadn't heard from her since Saturday night. His texts, his calls, all unanswered. By midday, police had received an official missing persons report. Jeanine Cammarata had vanished. The investigation began as most missing person cases do, checking alibis, retracing steps, but suspicion quickly turned into a tangle of contradictions. Aaron was the first to fall under the microscope. He was, after all, the last known person to see her alive, and his past carried shadows. Years earlier, he had been arrested for violating a protection order filed by an ex-girlfriend. It was enough to raise red flags. When detectives questioned him, Aaron described his relationship with Jeanine as happy and steady. He claimed that around 9 o'clock on Saturday night, March 30th, Jeanine left his apartment in Staten Island, saying she was going to Queens to see her kids. He said he hadn't seen her since. But then he added something strange. A couple of days later, he received text messages from her phone. They read, "I've had a long night and a rough couple of days. I don't want to talk to anyone. I'll reach out eventually." The words felt cold, distant, nothing like Jeanine's usual warmth. Detectives noticed it too. The phrasing didn't sound like her. But because Aaron turned over his phone willingly, gave them access to his records, and showed no signs of concealment, suspicion around him began to fade. Attention shifted toward another figure in Jeanine's life, Michael Cammarata, her estranged husband. Unlike Aaron, Michael didn't even own a cell phone in 2019, an oddity in itself. And when asked about Jeanine's disappearance, he showed little concern, almost detached. A husband and father, yet not an ounce of urgency about the mother of his children, suddenly vanishing. The indifference was chilling. Even stranger was the attitude of Aisha, Michael's new girlfriend, and the one currently looking after Jeanine's two youngest children. When detectives sat her down, her demeanor was startlingly calm. She claimed that Jeanine had indeed come to Queens that night. According to Aisha, the three of them sat in Jeanine's car. Because it was late, Michael refused to let Jeanine take the kids. Aisha said Jeanine then fell asleep in the car, and that she and Michael simply left her there. The story didn't sit right. Who abandons a woman alone in a car in the middle of the night? Technology soon stepped in, where human words faltered. New York City's license plate readers, LPRs, stationed across bridges and highways, tracked Jeanine's white Chevy Cruze. The system confirmed that on Saturday night, her car did head toward Queens. But then came the twist. 24 hours later on Sunday night, the Cruze was recorded crossing the Verrazzano Narrows Bridge back into Staten Island. The problem: Michael had claimed Jeanine never returned. Contradictions piled up. A missing mother, a husband with no phone, a girlfriend too calm, and a car that seemed to move on its own. Detectives understood by now, this was no voluntary disappearance. This was no woman running away from her life. This was the beginning of a homicide investigation. And to reach the truth, they would have to peel back layers of lies one by one, starting with the two people who last saw Jeanine alive, Michael and Aisha. When detectives circled back to Jeanine Cammarata and Aisha, the holes in their stories became impossible to ignore. Michael insisted he had only seen Jeanine briefly in Queens, then went his own way. Aisha repeated her version, that Jeanine had fallen asleep in the car, and that she and Michael simply left her there. On paper, it sounded neat. In reality, it was a tale so cold, so implausible, it set off every alarm. Who abandons a mother of three to sleep alone in a car at night? Detective Torres and his team knew they needed something objective, something that couldn't be twisted by words. In New York City, the streets themselves often testify. Cameras mounted on buildings, in lobbies, on street corners, catch the things people try to hide. And when investigators pulled the surveillance footage from Michael's apartment complex, the story shifted forever. The video was clear. Jeanine drove up in her white Chevy Cruze. Michael and Aisha got into the car with her. All three left together. But later that night, the Cruze returned, and this time only Michael and Aisha stepped out. Jeanine had vanished. What came next chilled the detectives. The cameras captured Michael in the courtyard, struggling with a shopping cart carrying a large black trash bag. The bag sagged with weight, heavy, unnatural. Aisha walked beside him, opening the door, holding it, as he wheeled the cart inside. Their movements were calm, almost routine, as though they weren't moving something horrific, but groceries. That footage shattered Aisha's earlier account. There was no Jeanine sleeping in the car. There was Michael pushing her absence wrapped in plastic. When confronted, Michael's facade began to crack. At first he stayed calm, insisting he didn't know what had happened. But under pressure, he admitted there had been a physical altercation with Jeanine. He said he had pushed her, even hit her. Then abruptly, he clammed up, demanded a lawyer. The interrogation ended, but the damage was done. His own words shifted the case from a missing person to a violent assault. Aisha's mask slipped soon after. With the footage in front of her, she could no longer cling to her earlier lies. Her story changed. She described a fierce argument in the car that night, Jeanine shouting, Michael, shouting louder. According to Aisha, Michael struck Jeanine until she went limp. He moved her into the passenger seat. Aisha admitted she helped him bring Jeanine back to the apartment. Her words painted a horrific picture. Jeanine at one point, regaining consciousness, screaming, pulling her own hair in panic. Michael, terrified the neighbors might hear, punched her again until she went quiet. Aisha claimed Jeanine was still breathing when they stuffed her into the bag, but when she woke again, Michael took care of it. The detectives didn't believe every word. They saw Aisha not as a frightened bystander, but as an accomplice. The footage made it undeniable. She was there steadying doors, steadying lies, steadying Michael's descent into murder. By that, detectives no longer asked, "Where is Jeanine?" They knew she was gone. The real question had become darker. What did Michael and Aisha do? With her body, piece by piece, the puzzle came together. A car returning 24 hours later, a trash bag too heavy to be ordinary. A girlfriend's story, collapsing under the eye of a camera. It all pointed to one terrible conclusion. Jeanine hadn't just disappeared. She had been silenced. The only missing piece now was the most haunting of all. Where had they hidden her remains? And when that answer surfaced, it would be more brutal than anyone could imagine. On Thursday, April 4th, 2019, 5 days after Jeanine disappeared, a call came through the Crime Stoppers tip line. The information was chilling. Michael Cammarata had rented a storage unit on Staten Island, only a few miles from Jeanine's apartment. A place meant for old furniture and forgotten keepsakes had become a vault for something unspeakable. Detectives secured a search warrant and moved in. They cut the lock, rolled up the metal door, and stepped into the dim unit. At first it seemed ordinary boxes, household items, random belongings. But in the corner sat a large black trash bag. Even before they touched it, the officers sensed what lay inside. When the bag was opened, the stench hit them like a wall burnt flesh. Chemical smoke, the unmistakable odor of death. Inside were human remains charred beyond recognition. Jeanine, the devoted teacher, the mother of 3, the glue of her family, had been reduced to ashes and fragments, discarded like refuse. The medical examiner later confirmed the cause of death: blunt force trauma to the head and asphyxiation. The injuries matched the violent struggle described by Aisha. It was no accident. It was murder. The surveillance footage from the storage facility removed any lingering doubt. The Chrysler Town and Country van pulled in, children tumbling out as Michael and Aisha unloaded the heavy black bag and a blue storage bin. The cold indifference was undeniable. Michael hauling his wife's body, Aisha helping him at every step. And all while the children sat nearby, unaware their mother was being hidden forever. The motive soon became clear. Michael faced divorce, custody loss, and the looming weight of alimony and child support. To him, Jeanine wasn't a person anymore. She was a threat to his control, his money, his pride. Aisha, fearing the loss of Michael's support, chose to stand by him, even if it meant betraying a friend and destroying a mother. Fast forward to September of 2021. The trial of Michael Cammarata began in Staten Island Supreme Court. The prosecution built their case meticulously. The surveillance footage, the GPS, records the storage unit in his name, the autopsy results, and the lies unraveling from both Michael and Aisha. Piece by piece, they reconstructed the night. Jeanine vanished, and the jury saw it for what it was: a premeditated act of brutality. Michael's defense attorney tried to shift blame onto Aisha, painting her as the real killer, desperate and manipulative. But the evidence was overwhelming. Aisha herself had already accepted a plea deal admitting guilt to first-degree manslaughter in exchange for a sentence of 7 to 9 years. To Jeanine's family, that was an insult far too lenient for someone who helped carry out the crime. On October 18th, 2021, the jury returned its verdict. Michael Cammarata was guilty of second-degree murder, concealment, and tampering with evidence. 1 month later, Judge Mario Mattei pronounced the sentence: 23 years to life in prison. Michael stood emotionless, stone-faced, as if the words bounced off a hollow shell. He muttered an apology, a whisper of a remorse. "I'm sorry for everything. Sorry for the kids." But it was too little, too late. To Jeanine's family, it rang hollow, a final insult to the memory of a woman who had fought so hard for her children. In the gallery, Christine Ross, Jeanine's sister, wept. To her, the verdict was both victory and defeat. Justice had been served, but nothing, not 23 years, not life, not even death could restore what Michael had taken. And so, the trial ended, the gavel fell, and Michael was led away in chains. But for Jeanine's family, the sentence was not closure. It was a reminder that their lives would forever carry a void shaped like a mother, a teacher, a sister, a woman whose light had been extinguished by those who once claimed to love her. Inside the courtroom that day, when Judge Mario Mattei delivered Michael Cammarata's sentence of 23 years to life, there was no applause, no celebration, only silence and tears. Christine Ross, Jeanine's sister, collapsed into sobs. For her, justice had arrived, but it was incomplete. Nothing could bring back the sister who had been the heart of their family. Michael, the man who once promised love, stood expressionless. His voice cracked only slightly as he muttered an apology. "I'm sorry for everything. Sorry for the kids." But his words were hollow, empty, stripped of sincerity. There was no grief, no humanity, only the shadow of a man, consumed by control. Then there was Aisha, the accomplice who had once been Jeanine's colleague, and even her friend. Her sentence, 7 to 9 years, felt to the family like a cruel joke. Too light, too merciful for someone who opened doors, held bags, and chose betrayal over compassion. And so the question lingered, was justice truly served? Or was this only the law, a system that punishes but can never heal? For Jeanine's children, the verdict did not erase the nightmares. They would grow up without their mother, knowing she had been stolen not by strangers, but by the very people who were supposed to protect them. For Christine and the rest of the family, the wound will never close. Jeanine once taught her first graders about kindness, about how love could heal. But her own story revealed something darker. When love turns into control, when affection curdles into power, the human heart can twist into something monstrous. Today, Jeanine's students still remember her smile. Her family still remembers her small frame and her enormous spirit. But all of them carry the same truth. No sentence, no number of years can ever restore what was lost. And perhaps the deepest lesson of all is this: evil does not only live in the act of killing, it also lives in betrayal, in silence, in the choice to abandon compassion. Jeanine's voice may be gone, but her story remains. A story that asks each of us to look harder at the shadows around us and to never forget the light that was extinguished. If you want to follow more stories like Jeanine's, real crimes, real darkness, and the pursuit of justice through blood and heartbreak, stay with us. Because only by facing the shadows can we truly understand the value of the light.